Hello, welcome to today's Odyssey. Whenever you catch a glimpse of the sun, all you see is a blinding yellow dot floating in the sky. This yellow dot is what life on this planet constantly relies on. We can rely on it to warm us up, even warm us up to the extreme, like global warming, for example. But that's not what we're going to talk about. Today we're talking about the sudden outbursts of energy from the burning surface of the sun. And when I say sudden outbursts, it's not something small. I'm talking about a huge outburst of energy that can cause geomagnetic storms and put the Earth into an internet apocalypse. In a bit, I'll get into more details on what geomagnetic storms really are and what this means for planet Earth. So stay tuned. The sun is like a giant ball of fire that has a lot of energy and magnetism. Sometimes the sun's magnetism gets twisted and tangled, and it causes a big explosion of fire and gas. And so, a rare but extreme occurrence happens. What do you think of when you hear the word storm? Images of rolling black clouds might fill your mind. The crack of thunder probably fills your ears. Your eyes may search the sky for bolts of lightning. But I'm not talking about a regular thunderstorm. I'm talking about a solar storm. I'm talking about a large eruption of plasma and magnetic fields from the sun's surface called a coronal mass ejection, or CME for short. And would you believe that the Earth is occasionally hit with solar storms, and you probably don't see or hear any of the things just mentioned? Solar storms do happen occasionally, and these can alter the Earth's magnetic field. But then if you compare a solar storm to a solar superstorm, there's a huge difference. It's something so rare that it occurs once every 100 years for a particular reason, and it's even happened before. This event is known as the Carrington Event, as it was the last time a major eruption of energy occurred. On September 1st, 1859, a bright solar flare was headed towards Earth, and this flare would be the worst solar storm recorded in history. Two British astronomers, Richard Christopher Carrington and Richard Hodgson, observed and recorded the sight by making sketches and reports. The flare was so intense that it was visible to the naked eye, and it lasted for about 5 minutes straight. And it didn't take long for those charged particles and magnetic fields to strike Earth, because it was traveling up to 3,000 kilometers per second. 18 hours later, it began to wreak havoc, causing the most intense geomagnetic storm in recorded history. The telegraph system was taken out, and sparks were literally flying off the telegraph lines. Some operators got electrocuted because the wires ended up carrying high voltage, which they were never supposed to do, but the magnetic field variations became so strong it almost became a generator system and drove these currents down telegraph wires. And when I say the telegraph system was taken out, I meant there were strong electric currents in the ground and even affected the long telegraph wires that connected continents. So this wasn't something small. During that terrible storm, some telegraph operators reported that they could send and receive messages without using batteries, while others disconnected their equipment to avoid damage. Not only did the storm cause fires in multiple telegraph stations, it also created spectacular auroras, or northern lights, that were seen all over the world, even in places that normally do not see them. You could see an aurora even if you were in Cuba, Hawaii, or Australia. The auroras were so bright that they lit up the night sky, and some people thought it was dawn or the end of the world. During a geomagnetic storm, not only does it make auroras more widespread and brighter, it also changes the climate, the ozone layer, and it also affects the direction and the shape of the Earth's magnetic field, which can affect how the charged particles enter and travel in the atmosphere. So, we know that a huge outburst of energy, or a CME, can happen, but how does all of this really occur? Well, it certainly isn't random. There are countless areas on the sun where a CME can occur. For example, there are these dark spots on the sun called sunspots. They sort of look like moles, but they certainly aren't small. They are planet-sized. These Earth-sized spots have a really strong magnetism and can even break through the surface, creating these glowing arches that extend into the sun's atmosphere. But this isn't the only way a CME can occur. Clouds of hot plasma with electrically charged particles are held above the sun's surface by the sun's magnetic field. These bright and burning hot clouds are called solar filaments or prominences. The gas can either fall back to the sun, or sometimes the prominences can erupt into space, creating powerful explosions or CMEs. A CME can happen more often when the sun's activity is increased, which happens every 11 years or so. The sun completes what is called a solar cycle. This cycle affects the sun's surface, making it more active. For example, it affects how many solar sunspots and filaments there are. If there are more of these, it increases the chance of a CME occurring. If we look back and think about what happened during the Carrington Event, we'd be going through a rough time if a similar event happened today. Because we're currently in an era where we rely on the internet for almost everything. We'd literally go through an internet apocalypse, which could last for weeks or even months. You see, the internet relies on a complex network of cables, routers, servers, and devices that are especially sensitive to electrical surges and fluctuations from a storm that carries nothing but energy with it. A solar superstorm can induce currents in the ground and in the long undersea cables that connect continents, which can cause internet outages. When we're talking about CMEs, we also have to think about the radiation and the debris a CME can leave. Want to know what I'm talking about? The radiation levels in space are increased and poses health risks for astronauts and affects satellites, which is a major concern. The internet is dependent on satellites for global communication, navigation, and weather monitoring. Now, a solar superstorm doesn't only affect our astronauts, it also affects anyone who flies on airplanes. Well, fortunately, such extreme events are very rare and unlikely to happen in the near future since it occurs every 100 years or so. However, scientists are still monitoring the sun's activity and trying to improve their forecasting and lessen the impact of another disaster. NASA predicts that the sun will reach its next peak of activity, called the solar maximum, in 2025, meaning that the sun will produce more frequent and stronger flares and CMEs, but not necessarily ones that will hit the Earth directly. NASA is also developing artificial intelligence to better predict and detect solar storms up to 30 minutes in advance. 30 minutes is a decent amount of time, and this could give time for operators to protect the backbone of modern society and equipment from the effects of an upcoming solar storm. Also, some researchers are working on creating an early warning system for dangerous solar activity that could damage the internet. They're suggesting that the internet needs to be tougher and given capabilities to withstand the hardships to come. We need a strong internet system, don't we? Multiple people have jobs that rely on the internet. People like us can protect our technology by simply unplugging our devices, which is the easiest thing to do. Using surge protectors could also help to limit the voltage amount reaching our technology. Another way to protect your technology is by using shielding materials like aluminum foil, cardboard, or metal containers, which can block or reduce the electromagnetic radiation and the magnetic fields. To provide some examples with what you could do, you can wrap your devices in aluminum foil, put them in a cardboard box, or place them in a metal garbage can. Well, these are some of the ways to protect your technology from a geomagnetic storm. However, these methods may not be enough to protect your devices from the very powerful and rare storm. Whoa, that was a lot to take in. Learning about those solar storms and all of that. I appreciate you all joining me on this odyssey, and make sure to inform those around you, or send this video to your friends because this is a warning. If you want to learn more, check out the description for additional links, and subscribing is a form of bookmarking the channel to see more of our awesome content. With that, I'll see you next time.